The whole village could smell her cooking before they even saw her. Spices danced through the air, rich and warm, wrapping around every home like a promise. Children would pause their games, elders would lift their heads, and even travelers passing by would slow their steps. Everyone knew exactly whose kitchen it was. It was Amina's. And Amina loved that. She didn't just cook, she performed. Every stir of her pot, every sprinkle of spice, every taste she took was done with confidence, like she already knew the outcome would be perfect. And most of the time it was. Her jollof rice never burned, her stews were always deep with flavor, and her bread came out soft enough to melt in your mouth. People didn't just eat her food, they talked about it for days. At first, her pride seemed harmless. After all, she had worked hard to master her craft. But slowly, that pride began to grow into something else. "I am the best cook this village has ever seen," she would say, loud enough for everyone at the market to hear. "No one can match my hands, no one can match my taste." Some would laugh it off. Others would nod politely. But not everyone was amused. There was something about the way she said it, like there was no room left for anyone else to shine. One afternoon, as the sun hung lazily over the baobab trees, Amina stood in the center of the marketplace, surrounded by a small crowd. She had just finished cooking a pot of her famous peanut stew, and the aroma alone had already drawn people in. "Go on," she urged, handing out bowls with a proud smile. "Taste it. Tell me if you have ever had anything better." The villagers tasted. As expected, their faces lit up. "It's delicious," one woman said. "Perfect," another added. Amina crossed her arms, satisfied. "Of course it is." But just as the murmurs of praise filled the air, a voice from the back of the crowd spoke up. "It's good, but not the best." The crowd fell silent. Amina's smile froze. Slowly, people stepped aside, revealing a stranger standing at the edge of the gathering. He wasn't dressed like someone from the village. His clothes were simple, dusty from travel, and his face carried the calm confidence of someone who had seen many places. Amina raised an eyebrow. "And who are you to say that?" The man stepped forward, his eyes steady. "Someone who has tasted many kitchens, and learned from the best." A soft murmur rippled through the crowd. No one had ever spoken to Amina like that before. She let out a short laugh, though there was a sharp edge to it. "Then perhaps your tongue is confused," she said. "Because what you just tasted is perfection." The man shook his head gently. "Perfection does not need to announce itself." A few people gasped quietly. The tension in the air thickened. Amina took a step closer, her pride now fully awakened. "If you think you can do better," she said, her voice steady but challenging, "then prove it." The stranger didn't hesitate. "I will." The crowd grew instantly excited. A cooking challenge? This was something the village had never seen before. "When?" someone called out. "Tomorrow," Amina said quickly, not giving the stranger a chance to set the terms. "At sunrise. Right here." The man nodded. "Tomorrow then." And just like that, it was decided. That evening, the entire village buzzed with anticipation. People gathered in small groups, whispering and guessing what would happen. Some were certain Amina would win. After all, she had never been defeated. Others were curious about the stranger. There was something about his calmness that made them wonder if he knew something they didn't. But inside her home, Amina wasn't as calm as she pretended to be. She stood over her cooking pots, staring at the ingredients she had used 100 times before. Tomatoes, onions, spices, oil, everything familiar. Everything safe. Yet for the first time, doubt crept into her mind. Who was that man? And why didn't he seem afraid? She shook her head, pushing the thought away. "I am the best," she whispered to herself. "I've always been the best." Still, she couldn't ignore the strange feeling in her chest. Meanwhile, on the edge of the village, the stranger sat quietly under a tree, preparing his own ingredients. Unlike Amina, he didn't rush. He didn't boast. He simply worked, carefully and patiently, as if the outcome was already written. The moon rose high in the sky, casting a soft glow over both of them. Two cooks in two different places preparing for the same moment. One driven by pride. The other by something deeper. By the time the first light of dawn touched the earth, the entire village had gathered. Fires were lit. Pots were ready. Eyes were fixed on the two challengers. Amina stepped forward, her chin held high, her confidence returned, at least on the surface. The stranger followed, calm as ever. "Today," Amina announced, her voice ringing across the crowd, "we will see who truly deserves to be called the best." The villagers leaned in, their hearts pounding with excitement. But just as the challenge was about to begin, the stranger placed something unusual on the table, an ingredient no one in the village had ever seen before. Amina's eyes narrowed. For the first time she hesitated. And in that single moment of silence something shifted. Because deep down she realized, this was not going to be as easy as she thought. Amina couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not just in the crowd but inside her. The praise she once enjoyed now felt uncertain, like it could slip away at any moment. She had always been the one people looked up to, the one they trusted when it came to food. But now, their eyes moved between her and the stranger, as if they were seeing her for the first time. The tasting didn't end the way she expected. There was no clear winner, no loud celebration in her favor. Instead, people stayed talking in small groups, comparing flavors, sharing thoughts. Some still defended Amina, saying her food was bold and unforgettable. Others spoke quietly about the stranger's dish, describing it in ways that didn't quite make sense. It felt comforting, one woman said. It reminded me of home, even though it's not from here, another added. Amina stood nearby, pretending not to listen, but every word reached her. That evening, the village didn't settle the way it usually did. Fires burned a little longer, conversations stretched deeper into the night. The cooking challenge had turned into something more than just a test of skill, it had stirred something personal in everyone. And at the center of it all was Amina. Inside her home, she sat alone, staring at the same pots and ingredients that had once brought her so much pride. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. She replayed the moment again and again, the silence after the stranger's dish was tasted, the look on people's faces, the boy's strange words. This tastes like a story. What did that even mean? Food was about flavor, balance, technique. That's what she had always believed. That's what she had mastered. So how could something else, something she couldn't see or measure, make such a difference? A soft knock on her door broke her thoughts. It was Zuri, her childhood friend. You didn't come out tonight, Zuri said gently as she stepped inside. People were asking about you. Amina shrugged, trying to appear calm. I needed rest. Zuri studied her for a moment. You've never needed rest after cooking before. Amina didn't respond. Zuri walked closer, lowering her voice. You're bothered. Amina let out a small breath, her guard slipping just a little. I don't understand him, she admitted. He didn't do anything special. He didn't use rare spices or show off any skill. And yet people felt something, Zuri finished. Amina nodded slowly. Zuri sat beside her. Maybe it's not just about cooking. Amina frowned. Then what is it about? But Zuri didn't answer right away. Outside, on the edge of the village, the stranger was once again sitting under the same tree. A few villagers had gathered around him this time, not to challenge him, but to talk. Where did you learn to cook like that? An elder asked. The stranger smiled faintly. From my grandmother, he said again. She believed food carries memory. That every dish should tell a story. Memory? Someone repeated. He nodded. Yes. Not just taste but feeling. The kind that stays with you. The villagers exchanged looks. It was a strange idea, but after what they had experienced that day, it didn't sound impossible. Back inside her home, Amina felt restless. She stood up suddenly, pacing the room. I've spent years perfecting my cooking, she said. Years? And now someone comes from nowhere and makes people question everything? Zuri watched her carefully. Are you upset because of him, or because of what people are saying? Amina stopped. The question lingered in the air. Before she could answer, another thought pushed its way forward. That ingredient. I need to know what he used, she said quietly. Zuri raised an eyebrow. Why? Because that's the only thing that was different, Amina insisted. If I know what it is, I can understand how he did it. But even as she said it, something about that explanation felt incomplete. Later that night, when most of the village had gone to sleep, Amina stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky filled with stars. She hesitated for a moment, then began walking toward the edge of the village. Toward the stranger. When she reached the tree, she saw that he was still awake, quietly sorting through his things. You're not asleep? She asked. He looked up, unsurprised. Neither are you. Amina crossed her arms, trying to hold on to her confidence. I came to ask you something. He waited. That ingredient, she said. The one wrapped in leaves. What is it? The stranger studied her for a moment before answering. It's not something you can find in a market. Amina frowned. Everything can be found somewhere. He shook his head gently. Not this. Her frustration grew. Then where did you get it? There was a pause. Then he said, it was given to me. Amina's eyes narrowed. By who? The stranger looked away briefly as if recalling something distant. By someone who taught me that cooking is not about being the best, but about understanding what people need even when they don't say it. His words only deepened the mystery. Amina felt a mix of irritation and curiosity rising inside her. You talk like everything is a lesson, she said. But tomorrow people will expect a clear answer. They will want to know who is better. The stranger met her gaze again. And what do you want? The question caught her off guard. For a moment she didn't have an answer. Because for the first time winning didn't feel as simple as it used to. The night grew quieter around them, but the tension between them only grew stronger. And as Amina turned to leave, one thought stayed with her. If she didn't understand what was really happening, she might lose more than just a cooking challenge. Amina couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted, not just in the crowd but inside her. The praise she once enjoyed now felt uncertain, like it could slip away at any moment. She had always been the one people looked up to, the one they trusted when it came to food. But now, their eyes moved between her and the stranger, as if they were seeing her for the first time. The tasting didn't end the way she expected. There was no clear winner, no loud celebration in her favor. Instead, people stayed talking in small groups, comparing flavors, sharing thoughts. Some still defended Amina, saying her food was bold and unforgettable. Others spoke quietly about the stranger's dish, describing it in ways that didn't quite make sense. It felt comforting, one woman said. It reminded me of home, even though it's not from here, another added. Amina stood nearby, pretending not to listen, but every word reached her. That evening, the village didn't settle the way it usually did. Fires burned a little longer, conversations stretched deeper into the night. The cooking challenge had turned into something more than just a test of skill, it had stirred something personal in everyone. And at the center of it all was Amina. Inside her home, she sat alone, staring at the same pots and ingredients that had once brought her so much pride. Nothing had changed, yet everything felt different. She replayed the moment again and again, the silence after the stranger's dish was tasted, the look on people's faces, the boy's strange words. This tastes like a story. What did that even mean? Food was about flavor, balance, technique. That's what she had always believed. That's what she had mastered. So how could something else, something she couldn't see or measure, make such a difference? A soft knock on her door broke her thoughts. It was Zuri, her childhood friend. You didn't come out tonight, Zuri said gently as she stepped inside. People were asking about you. Amina shrugged, trying to appear calm. I needed rest. Zuri studied her for a moment. You've never needed rest after cooking before. Amina didn't respond. Zuri walked closer, lowering her voice. You're bothered. Amina let out a small breath, her guard slipping just a little. I don't understand him, she admitted. He didn't do anything special. He didn't use rare spices or show off any skill. And yet people felt something, Zuri finished. Amina nodded slowly. Zuri sat beside her. Maybe it's not just about cooking. Amina frowned. Then what is it about? But Zuri didn't answer right away. Outside, on the edge of the village, the stranger was once again sitting under the same tree. A few villagers had gathered around him this time, not to challenge him, but to talk. Where did you learn to cook like that? An elder asked. The stranger smiled faintly. From my grandmother, he said again. She believed food carries memory. That every dish should tell a story. Memory? Someone repeated. He nodded. Yes. Not just taste but feeling. The kind that stays with you. The villagers exchanged looks. It was a strange idea, but after what they had experienced that day, it didn't sound impossible. Back inside her home, Amina felt restless. She stood up suddenly, pacing the room. I've spent years perfecting my cooking, she said. Years. And now someone comes from nowhere and makes people question everything? Zuri watched her carefully. Are you upset because of him, or because of what people are saying? Amina stopped. The question lingered in the air. Before she could answer, another thought pushed its way forward. That ingredient. I need to know what he used, she said quietly. Zuri raised an eyebrow. Why? Because that's the only thing that was different, Amina insisted. If I know what it is, I can understand how he did it. But even as she said it, something about that explanation felt incomplete. Later that night, when most of the village had gone to sleep, Amina stepped outside. The air was cool, the sky filled with stars. She hesitated for a moment, then began walking toward the edge of the village. Toward the stranger. When she reached the tree, she saw that he was still awake, quietly sorting through his things. You're not asleep? She asked. He looked up, unsurprised. Neither are you. Amina crossed her arms, trying to hold on to her confidence. I came to ask you something. He waited. That ingredient, she said. The one wrapped in leaves. What is it? The stranger studied her for a moment before answering. It's not something you can find in a market. Amina frowned. Everything can be found somewhere. He shook his head gently. Not this. Her frustration grew. Then where did you get it? There was a pause. Then he said, it was given to me. Amina's eyes narrowed. By who? The stranger looked away briefly as if recalling something distant. By someone who taught me that cooking is not about being the best, but about understanding what people need even when they don't say it. His words only deepened the mystery. Amina felt a mix of irritation and curiosity rising inside her. You talk like everything is a lesson, she said. But tomorrow people will expect a clear answer. They will want to know who is better. The stranger met her gaze again. And what do you want? The question caught her off guard. For a moment she didn't have an answer. Because for the first time winning didn't feel as simple as it used to. The night grew quieter around them, but the tension between them only grew stronger. And as Amina turned to leave, one thought stayed with her. If she didn't understand what was really happening, she might lose more than just a cooking challenge. The next morning didn't feel like any other day in the village. The air itself seemed heavier, like it was waiting for something important to happen. Word had already spread, there would be a final round. Not just another cooking challenge, but the one that would decide everything. Amina barely slept. She kept hearing the stranger's words in her mind. Not something you can find in a market. It was given to me. Cooking is about understanding what people need. None of it made sense to her, and yet she couldn't ignore it either. When the sun began to rise, she was already awake, standing in her kitchen. The familiar ingredients sat in front of her, but for the first time she didn't reach for them right away. Her hands hovered in the air, uncertain. What do people need? She shook her head, frustrated. They need good food, she muttered. That's all. But deep down she knew that answer wasn't enough anymore. Outside, the village gathered again, larger than the day before. Even people from nearby areas had come, curious to witness the final outcome. The atmosphere was different this time, quieter, more serious. There were no playful whispers, no easy laughter. This wasn't just about pride anymore. Amina stepped into the open space, her posture strong, but her mind racing. She scanned the crowd briefly, noticing how people looked at her now, not just with admiration but with expectation. Then she saw him. The stranger stood across from her, calm as ever. No signs of doubt. No signs of pressure. It was as if this moment didn't weigh on him the same way it did on her. That unsettled her more than anything. The elder stepped forward once again. Today, he said, his voice steady, you will each prepare one final dish. No limits. No rules. Cook what you believe will truly show who you are. Amina's chest tightened slightly. Who you are. Not what you can do. The words felt different. The fire was lit again. The pots were placed. The challenge began. Amina moved, but not with the same rhythm as before. She picked up her knife, then put it down. She reached for her spices, then paused. Everything she had always done with certainty now felt like a choice she had to question. Around her, the sounds of cooking filled the air again, but this time she could hear more than just her own movements. She could hear the stranger. Not loudly, not in a distracting way, but in the quiet confidence of how he worked. The soft chop of his knife. The gentle stir of his pot. The patience in every step. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't forced. It was intentional. Amina tried to focus. She began preparing a dish she knew well, something rich, something bold. Something that had always earned her praise. But as she cooked, she noticed something strange. She wasn't enjoying it. Her movements felt heavier, like she was trying to prove something instead of creating something. Across from her, a small group had gathered around the stranger again. But this time they weren't asking many questions. They were just watching. One elderly woman stepped closer to him. Who are you really? She asked softly. The stranger smiled faintly. Someone who learned too late what truly matters. The woman studied him. And what is that? He paused, then said quietly, listening. Those nearby fell silent. Amina heard that too. Her hands slowed. Listening? She glanced at the crowd. People stood there with different expressions. Curiosity, hope, even emotion. Some looked tired. Some looked thoughtful. Some looked like they were carrying stories of their own. For a brief moment, Amina felt something shift again. But just as quickly her pride pushed back. This is a competition, she reminded herself. You don't win by hesitating. She turned back to her pot, adding more spice, more flavor, building something strong and undeniable. Time passed. The sun climbed higher. The tension grew. No one spoke loudly anymore. Even the children were quiet, sensing the importance of what they were witnessing. Finally, the moment came again. The fires were lowered. The cooking stopped. 2 dishes. 2 stories. 2 paths that had led to this exact moment. Amina stepped forward first this time, but something in her expression had changed. She still held her head high, but her eyes carried something deeper, something uncertain. She placed her dish before the elders and stepped back. Then the stranger did the same. For a second no one moved. The entire village seemed to hold its breath. The elder looked at both dishes, then at the crowd. "This is not just about taste," he said slowly. "It is about truth." The first bowl was lifted. Amina's. The tasters took a bite. Their reactions came quickly this time, nods, quiet approval. It was strong, flavorful, exactly what they expected from her. Amina watched closely, her heart beating fast. Then the second bowl was lifted. The strangers. Again the tasters took a bite. And once again, silence. But this time it felt heavier than before. One of the tasters lowered the spoon slowly, as if trying to hold on to the moment. Another looked down, lost in thought. A third took a second bite, slower this time. Amina felt her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. "What do you taste?" But no one answered right away. Because whatever they were experiencing, it wasn't something they could easily explain. The wind moved softly through the village, carrying the mixed aromas into the air. And standing there, between expectation and doubt, Amina realized that this moment, this exact moment, would change everything. But she still didn't know how. And neither did anyone else. No one spoke, and that silence began to feel louder than any reaction Amina had ever heard before. She searched their faces, looking for something clear. Approval, rejection, anything, but what she saw only made her more uneasy. It wasn't just about taste anymore. It was something deeper, something she still couldn't fully understand. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, the elder slowly placed the bowl down and looked at the stranger. "There is something you have not told us," he said. A ripple of curiosity moved through the crowd. Amina turned sharply toward the stranger. Her heart was already racing, but now it felt like it had skipped a beat. "What does that mean?" she asked. The stranger didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his small bag again, the same one he had kept close since the beginning. The crowd leaned in as he pulled out another bundle of green leaves, similar to the one he had used before. But this time he didn't open it. "This," he said quietly, holding it up, "is not just an ingredient." The whispers grew louder. Amina stepped closer, her eyes locked on the bundle. "Then what is it?" she demanded. The stranger looked around the crowd before speaking again. "It is a memory," he said. The words landed strangely. Some people frowned. Others looked confused. "A memory?" the elder repeated. The stranger nodded. "Every time I cook with this, I remember where I came from. The people who taught me. The moments that shaped me. It changes how I cook, not because of what it is, but because of what it carries." Amina felt a sudden wave of frustration rise inside her. "That makes no sense," she said. "Food is food. You can't cook with memories." The stranger's eyes met hers, steady but not unkind. "Are you sure?" Before she could respond, another voice spoke up from the crowd. "You've tasted it yourself," said the elderly woman from earlier. "You felt something, didn't you?" All eyes turned to Amina. For a moment she said nothing. Because deep down, she had. But admitting that felt like giving something up, something she had built her identity on for years. "I felt confusion," she said finally, her voice firm. Nothing more. The stranger didn't argue. He simply nodded as if he expected that answer. Then, without warning, he did something no one anticipated. He stepped forward and placed the unopened bundle of leaves directly in front of Amina. The entire crowd gasped softly. "Use it," he said. Amina blinked, caught off guard. "What?" "Use it," he repeated. "Cook with it. Right now." The tension shifted instantly. This was no longer just a competition between two cooks. It had become something else entirely. Amina looked down at the bundle, then back at him. "Why would I do that?" she asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. "Because you believe the ingredient is what makes the difference," he said calmly. "So take it. Prove it." The challenge hung in the air. If she refused, it would seem like fear. If she accepted, she risked something she didn't fully understand. The crowd began to murmur again, louder this time. Take it, someone whispered. Let's see what happens, another said. Amina's pride tightened around her like a shield. Slowly she reached out and picked up the bundle. It felt lighter than she expected. For a moment, everything around her faded, the crowd, the noise, even the stranger. All that remained was the bundle in her hands and the strange weight it carried in her mind. Fine, she said. I'll use it. A new fire was lit. A fresh pot was brought forward. This wasn't part of the original plan, but no one dared to stop it now. Amina moved back to the cooking space, holding the leaves carefully. For the first time since the challenge began, her hands felt uncertain. She opened the bundle. Inside there was something simple. Nothing rare. Nothing special to the eye. She frowned. This is it? She had expected something extraordinary, something powerful. But what she saw looked ordinary, almost disappointing. Still, she added it to the pot. The crowd watched in complete silence. Amina began to cook again, but this time, something was different. Her usual rhythm didn't return. Instead, her movements slowed. Her mind drifted. Without warning, memories began to surface. Her first time cooking with her mother, the laughter in their small kitchen, the mistakes she used to make, the patience she was shown. She blinked, trying to focus. But more memories came. Moments she hadn't thought about in years. Moments before she became the best. Her chest tightened. She stirred the pot, but her hands felt unfamiliar now, like she was learning all over again. Across from her, the stranger watched quietly. Not with judgment, but with understanding. The crowd began to notice the change too. She's different, someone whispered. Amina could feel it. The pressure. The eyes on her. The expectation. But for the first time, she wasn't sure what she was trying to prove anymore. Was she trying to win? Or was she trying to understand? The pot simmered softly in front of her. The aroma began to rise, but it wasn't like before. It wasn't loud or bold. It was gentle, uncertain, and somehow real. Amina stared at it, her heart pounding in a way she had never experienced during cooking. Because now the challenge wasn't just against the stranger. It was against everything she thought she knew about herself. And as the final moments approached once again, one question echoed in her mind. If this dish truly showed who she was she ready for the answer? The pot simmered quietly as Amina stood still, her hand resting lightly on the wooden spoon. For the first time in her life, she wasn't rushing to finish, wasn't trying to impress anyone. The fire beneath the pot burned steady, but inside her, everything felt unsettled. The crowd waited, holding on to every second. Is it ready? Someone finally asked. Amina didn't answer right away. She took a slow breath, then tasted the food. And everything went silent inside her. It wasn't the strongest flavor she had ever made. It wasn't the richest or the boldest. But it carried something she hadn't felt in a long time. It reminded her of simple days, of learning, of failing and trying again. It reminded her of her mother's quiet smile, of the way food used to bring people together, not to prove anything but to share something real. Her eyes softened. Yes, she said quietly. It's ready. The bowl was placed before the elders once more. This time the entire village leaned forward, not just curious, but deeply invested. The first taste was taken. A long pause followed. Then another. The elder looked up slowly, his expression unreadable. He took another bite as if making sure of what he was feeling. The others followed. No one rushed to speak. But something had clearly changed. Amina watched them, her heart pounding, but not out of fear this time. It was something else, something she couldn't quite name. Finally the elder set the bowl down. This, he began slowly, is different. The word echoed. Amina didn't interrupt. She just listened. It is not the same as before, he continued. It does not try to prove anything. It simply speaks. A soft murmur spread through the crowd. One woman wiped her eyes without realizing it. Another smiled faintly. The young boy stepped forward again, his voice gentle. This one feels like you. Amina felt something tighten in her chest. For the first time, the reactions didn't feel like judgment. They felt honest. She looked down at her hands, then back at the stranger. He gave a small nod. No pride. No surprise. Just acknowledgement. The elder stood tall, raising his voice so everyone could hear. Today we have witnessed more than a cooking competition, he said. We have seen two paths, one built on skill, the other on understanding. But in the end, the strongest dish is the one that carries truth. The crowd held its breath. Amina's heart raced again. Who is the best cook? Someone asked from the back. The elder paused. Then he said, there is no single best. A wave of surprise moved through the village. Amina blinked. The stranger remained still. You, the elder said, turning to Amina, have skill that cannot be denied. Your journey, your dedication, it is real. Then he turned to the stranger. And you have reminded us of something we had forgotten, that food is not just made by hands but by heart. He looked at both of them. And today, both of you have shown us something we needed. The crowd slowly began to nod. Not in excitement, but in understanding. Amina let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. She didn't feel defeated. But she didn't feel like the same person either. She stepped forward, looking at the stranger. You knew this would happen, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, he replied. I only hoped you would see it for yourself. Amina looked down at the empty bundle of leaves. That ingredient, she said, it wasn't special at all, was it? The stranger smiled faintly. It never was. Amina let out a small laugh, shaking her head. Then all this time, it wasn't about what you added. It was about what you allowed yourself to feel, he said. For a moment, everything felt clear. The tension, the confusion, the challenge, it all led to this understanding. But just as the crowd began to settle, just as the weight of the moment started to lift, the elder spoke again. There is one more thing. The air tightened once more. The elder looked directly at the stranger. You speak of your grandmother, he said. You speak of where you learned. But you have not told us why you came here. Amina's eyes shifted back to him. She hadn't asked that question. Not really. The stranger was quiet for a moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his bag one last time. This time he didn't take out an ingredient. He took out a small worn cloth. Carefully he unfolded it. Inside was something simple, a small wooden spoon, aged and smooth from years of use. Amina's breath caught. She recognized it. Her eyes widened as memories rushed back, stronger than before. This, she whispered, stepping closer, this belonged to my mother. The crowd stirred in confusion. Amina looked up at him, her voice unsteady now. How do you have this? The stranger met her gaze, and for the first time, something changed in his expression. Something deeper. Something personal. She was my grandmother too, he said softly. The world seemed to stop. Amina stared at him, unable to speak. All those years ago, he continued, before you became known as the best, before you chose your path, our family was separated. The words sank slowly. You learned from her in one way, he said. I learned from her in another. Amina's mind raced, trying to piece it together. All this time. This wasn't just a stranger. This wasn't just a challenge. This was something much bigger. Something she had never expected. The crowd faded into the background as the truth settled between them. And just as Amina opened her mouth to speak, to ask the questions now flooding her mind, the stranger took a small step back. I didn't come here to win, he said. I came to see if you remembered. Amina's heart pounded. Because now she wasn't sure. Had she? Amina stood frozen, her eyes fixed on the small wooden spoon in his hand. The noise of the village faded into the background, replaced by the sound of her own heartbeat. Memories she had buried under years of pride and routine began to rise, one after another, clearer than ever before. She remembered that spoon. Her mother used to hold it gently, stirring slowly, never rushing. She used to say, this is not just for mixing food, it is for mixing feeling. Amina had laughed at those words back then. She had been young, impatient, eager to prove herself. And somewhere along the way, she had forgotten. You're my family? Amina asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The stranger nodded. Yes, he said softly. We grew up apart, but we were taught by the same hands. Amina looked down, her thoughts racing. Everything suddenly made sense. The way he cooked, the way he spoke, the calm confidence he carried. It wasn't just skill. It was something she once had too, but lost. Why didn't you tell me from the beginning? She asked. He took a slow breath. Because you wouldn't have listened, he replied honestly. You believed you were already the best. There was no space left for anything else. The truth in his words didn't hurt the way she expected. Instead, it settled gently, like something she had been avoiding for too long. Around them, the villagers watched quietly, sensing that this moment was more than just part of the cooking competition. It was something deeper, something personal. Zuri stepped closer, her eyes soft. Amina, she said, this is what you were searching for, isn't it? Amina didn't answer right away. She looked at the spoon again, then at the stranger. No, not a stranger anymore. Her cousin. I think I was searching without knowing it, she admitted. There was a long silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It felt full, like something important had finally found its place. The elder stepped forward, his voice calm but warm. "Today we have learned something valuable," he said. "Not just about cooking but about pride, memory, and what it means to truly share something with others." The villagers nodded slowly. Some looked thoughtful. Some looked emotional. The cooking challenge that had started as a simple contest had turned into a lesson the entire village would remember. Amina took a deep breath, then turned fully toward her cousin. "Will you stay?" she asked. He smiled faintly. "For a while," he said. "If you're willing to learn again." Amina let out a small laugh, shaking her head. "I think I need to." The words felt strange but also right. For the first time she wasn't trying to prove anything. She was ready to grow. Over the next few days, things in the village began to change in small but meaningful ways. Amina still cooked, but her approach was different. She no longer rushed to impress or spoke loudly about being the best. Instead, she listened more, watching people, asking questions, understanding what they needed. Sometimes she would sit quietly before starting, just thinking. Other times she would smile as she remembered her mother's lessons, the ones she had once ignored. Her cousin stayed true to his word. He didn't take over her kitchen or try to outshine her. Instead, he guided her gently, sharing stories, showing her small things she had missed before. Not new recipes. Not secret ingredients. Just a different way of seeing. The villagers noticed the change too. Her food was still delicious, but now it carried something else. Something softer, something deeper. "It feels warmer," one woman said. "It feels honest," another added. And this time, when people praised her, Amina didn't lift her chin with pride. She simply smiled. One evening, as the sun began to set, Amina sat outside with her cousin, watching the sky turn shades of orange and gold. "You knew I had forgotten," she said quietly. He nodded. "A little," he admitted. "But I also knew you could remember." Amina looked down at the wooden spoon in her hands. She had kept it close ever since he showed it to her. "I thought being the best cook meant no one could compete with me," she said. "But now I see, that's not what it means at all." Her cousin smiled. "What do you think it means now?" Amina thought for a moment. Then she said, "It means making something that people feel, not just taste." He nodded, satisfied. The breeze moved gently around them, carrying the faint smell of cooking fires from the village. For the first time in a long while, everything felt peaceful. But more importantly, it felt real. As night fell, Amina stood up, ready to return to her kitchen. Not as the best cook, but as someone who was still learning. And somehow that felt even more powerful. Because this time she wasn't cooking to prove who she was. She was cooking to remember.